When I helped a stranded young woman on a dark, rainy night, I thought I was just doing what anyone would do. I had no idea she would remember my kindness or that her gratitude would completely transform my life in ways I never imagined possible. You would never be able to guess what happened next and how all of our lives changed forever after that day. Hi everyone, welcome to Life's Changing Stories. Now let's dive into today's story. Tim Rodriguez had learned to expect very little from life. At 42, he worked double shifts at a downtown warehouse, loading trucks and stacking inventory for barely above minimum wage. His small apartment in the rough part of Phoenix was nothing special: peeling paint, broken air conditioning, and neighbors who minded their own business. But it was home, and more importantly, it was all he could afford. Every evening after his grueling 10-hour shifts, Tim would stop by the apartment next door to check on Walter Chen, an 80-year-old retired postal worker who'd become like a father to him. Walter's wife had passed 3 years ago, and his children lived across the country, so Tim had naturally stepped into the role of caregiver and companion. They'd share dinner, watch the news, and talk about everything from Walter's postal route stories to Tim's dreams of a better life. Tim had dreams, even if they seemed impossible from where he sat. Since childhood, he'd been fascinated by technology and had taught himself basic computer programming through library books and free online courses. His biggest dream was to work for Innovative Solutions, a tech company downtown that seemed as unreachable as the moon. With only a high school diploma and no formal training, Tim knew he wasn't qualified for their entry-level positions, but he never stopped hoping. The night that changed everything started like any other. Tim had just finished his shift and was driving his beat-up Honda Civic through the industrial district when the sky opened up. Arizona's monsoon season could be brutal, and this storm was particularly fierce, sheets of rain pounding his windshield, lightning illuminating the dark streets, and thunder that seemed to shake the earth. As Tim navigated through a particularly desolate stretch of road lined with warehouses and empty lots, his headlights caught something that made him slow down. A young woman stood beside a sleek black sedan, her hazard lights blinking weakly in the torrential rain. She was soaked through, her business attire no match for the storm, and she appeared to be frantically trying to use her cell phone. Tim's first instinct was to keep driving. This wasn't the safest neighborhood, especially at night, and he'd heard too many stories about Good Samaritans getting robbed or worse. But as he watched the woman in his rearview mirror, something his mother had always told him echoed in his mind. "Mijo, we help people because it's right, not because it's easy." He pulled over and rolled down his window. "Hey, you okay?" The woman looked up, startled. Even in the rain, Tim could see she was young, maybe late 20s, with kind eyes that held a mixture of fear and desperation. "My car broke down," she called back, having to shout over the storm. "I've been trying to call for help, but my phone's not getting any signal." Tim made a decision that would change both their lives. He pulled his car closer and got out, immediately getting drenched. "I'm Tim," he said, approaching slowly with his hands visible. "I live nearby. You want me to take a look at your car?" The woman hesitated for a moment, clearly weighing her options. "I'm Hannah," she said finally. I'd really appreciate that." Tim popped her hood and immediately saw the problem. Her serpentine belt had snapped, probably due to the age of the rubber and the stress of the storm. "Your belt's broken," he called out over the rain. "This car's not going anywhere tonight." Hannah's face fell. "Oh no, I have an important meeting tomorrow morning across town. I don't know anyone in this area. And with this storm—" "Listen," Tim said, wiping rain from his eyes. "There's a 24-hour diner about 5 miles from here. I can give you a ride there, and you can call someone from inside where it's dry, or if you want, I can drive you wherever you need to go. I know this probably sounds crazy coming from a stranger, but I promise I'm not trying to hurt you or anything." Hannah studied his face for a long moment. Something about Tim's demeanor, genuine, concerned, with no hint of ulterior motive, convinced her. "You'd really do that? You don't even know me." "My mom raised me to help people when they're in trouble," Tim said simply. "Besides, nobody should be stuck out here in weather like this." Hannah gathered her purse and briefcase from her car, and Tim helped her into his Honda. As they drove through the storm, they talked. Hannah explained she was in Phoenix for business. She worked for a consulting firm based in Los Angeles and was meeting with potential clients. Tim told her about his warehouse job, his friendship with Walter, and even mentioned his dream of working in tech someday. "You taught yourself programming?" Hannah asked, genuinely impressed. "That takes incredible dedication." Tim shrugged, embarrassed. "It's probably not much compared to real programmers with actual degrees." "Don't sell yourself short," Hannah said firmly. "Some of the best programmers I know are self-taught. Passion and determination count for a lot more than people think." When they reached the diner, Tim insisted on waiting until Hannah had successfully contacted her company's travel coordinator and arranged for a ride to her hotel. It took nearly an hour, but Tim waited patiently, buying them both coffee and listening as Hannah shared stories about her travels and her work. As her ride finally arrived, a company car that would take her to her hotel downtown, Hannah turned to Tim with tears in her eyes. "I can't thank you enough. You could have just driven past, but you stopped. You could have just pointed me toward the diner, but you stayed. You reminded me that there are still genuinely good people in this world." "Anyone would have done the same thing," Tim said, though they both knew that wasn't true. "No, they wouldn't have," Hannah replied. "You know what? You remind me so much of my father. He passed away 2 years ago, but he always used to say that character is what you do when nobody's watching. Tonight, you showed real character." She handed him her business card. "If you're ever serious about that programming dream, call me. I know people in the industry." Tim took the card, but doubted he'd ever use it. People said things like that all the time, when they were grateful, but they rarely followed through. Still, as he watched her car disappear into the night, he felt good about what he'd done. The next morning was Tim's day off, a rare luxury that he typically spent catching up on household chores. He woke early and worked in the small garden behind his apartment building. Nothing fancy, just some tomatoes and peppers he grew to supplement his grocery budget. After that, he did laundry at the building's communal machines and spent the afternoon cleaning his apartment. His plan was to relax with some television and then visit Walter for their usual evening routine. Tim was halfway through a comedy special when he heard a soft knock at his front door. He frowned, checking the time. Walter was at his part-time job at the local hardware store, and Tim wasn't expecting anyone else. When he opened the door, Tim's jaw dropped. A man in an expensive-looking charcoal suit stood on his doorstep, and behind him, 2 other professionally dressed individuals waited beside a black SUV that clearly cost more than Tim made in several years. "Mr. Rodriguez?" the man asked, extending his hand. "I'm Michael Chen. I'm here on behalf of my younger sister." Tim shook the offered hand, confused. "I'm sorry, I think you might have the wrong—" Michael pulled out his phone and showed Tim a photo. It was Hannah smiling in what looked like a corporate headshot. "Is this the young woman you helped last night?" Tim's eyes widened. "Hannah, yes, that's her, but how did you—" "She got home safely," Michael said, his voice warm with gratitude. "And she couldn't stop talking about the kind stranger who helped her. She said you reminded her so much of our late father and insisted that I come see you today." "But how did you find me?" Tim asked, still processing what was happening. Hannah remembered quite a bit about your conversation, including the general area where you lived, Michael explained. "We talked to a few neighbors who pointed us in the right direction." Hannah felt terrible that she never got to properly thank you. Michael reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick white envelope. She wanted you to have this." Tim immediately tried to step back. No, I can't accept anything. I just helped someone who was stranded." Anyone would have done the same thing. "But not everyone would have," Michael said firmly. "And Hannah will not be happy if I return with this envelope. All she wants is to thank you properly for your kindness." Tim stared at the envelope, his hands trembling slightly as he took it. When he felt the thickness of it, the reality of what was inside hit him like a physical blow. Without warning, he burst into tears and found himself hugging this stranger, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't name. "Thank you," he managed between sobs. "Please tell Hannah thank you. I don't know what to say." "Actually," Michael said gently, "there's something else. Hannah mentioned that it's always been your dream to work in technology, specifically for a company called Innovative Solutions." Tim's head snapped up. "She remembered that?" Michael smiled. "She remembers everything about people who matter to her. I have some good news. There's currently an opening at Innovative Solutions, and it comes with 3 months of paid training for candidates who show promise. I put in a good word for you, but you'll need to submit a resume." This time, Tim didn't just cry. He sobbed like a child, overwhelmed by the impossibility of what was happening. His dream job, the one he'd thought was forever out of reach, was being offered to him because he'd helped a stranger in a storm. "This can't be real," he whispered. "Things like this don't happen to people like me." "They happen to people exactly like you," Michael said quietly. "Hannah has excellent judgment about character, and she saw something special in you. Don't let self-doubt rob you of this opportunity." 4 months later, Tim's life had been transformed beyond recognition. The money from Hannah had been more than generous, enough for Tim to move out of his struggling neighborhood and into a modest but comfortable apartment complex with actual amenities like working air conditioning and a swimming pool. But Tim's first decision hadn't been about himself. Walter had become family to him, and the thought of leaving the old man behind was unbearable. So Tim had done something that surprised everyone. He'd used part of Hannah's gift to move Walter and himself into a small house in a safe neighborhood where they could continue their evening routine in comfort and security. The job at Innovative Solutions had been everything Tim had dreamed and more. The 3-month training program had been intensive but rewarding, and Tim's natural aptitude for programming, combined with his incredible work ethic, had impressed his supervisors. By month 4, he'd been offered a full-time position with benefits that seemed too good to be true. Tim maintained regular contact with both Hannah and Michael, who had indeed treated him like family from that very first day. Hannah had returned from her business travels and often called to check on his progress at work. Michael had become a mentor, offering career advice and introducing Tim to networking opportunities in the tech industry. Every evening, Tim and Walter would sit on their front porch, watching the sunset and talking about how dramatically their lives had changed. Walter, who'd initially been suspicious of such extraordinary good fortune, had finally accepted that some people really were just genuinely kind. "You know what I think," Walter said one evening, as they watched neighborhood kids play in the street. "I think your mother would be proud of the man you became." Tim nodded, thinking about that stormy night that had changed everything. "I think about it sometimes. What would have happened if I'd just driven past Hannah that night?" "But you didn't," Walter pointed out. "That's what matters. You stopped because it was the right thing to do, not because you expected anything in return." That was the truth Tim held on to. His life had been transformed, not because he'd helped Hannah hoping for a reward, but because he'd helped her despite expecting nothing. The kindness had come back to him in ways that seemed too good to be true. But Walter was right. Good things really could happen to good people. As Tim sat on his porch that evening, watching Walter teach one of the neighborhood kids to play chess, he understood something profound about the nature of kindness. When you extend compassion to others, especially when it's difficult or inconvenient. That generosity has a way of returning to you in unexpected ways. Sometimes those returns come as money or job opportunities. Sometimes they come as new relationships or expanded communities. But always, they come as the quiet satisfaction of knowing you chose to be the kind of person who stops in the rain to help a stranger. Tim had learned that the most valuable currency in life isn't money. It's the connections we make, the kindness we show, and the courage we find to do the right thing even when no one is watching. And sometimes, when we least expect it, the universe has a way of rewarding that courage beyond our wildest dreams. We hope you enjoyed today's story of love, life, and betrayal. For more free stories and entertainment from our channel, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe with notifications.